Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Jewel. Jewel is a South African drama that tells the story of a woman named Tyra Black, a photographer who goes on a tour along the Vaal River to take photos for work, while also commemorating the end of the apartheid movement. One day, while taking pictures, she encounters a local woman named Sia. The two hit things off and strike a friendship with each other that appears to blossom into something more. This raises the ire of Sia's boyfriend, Chepo, who doesn't take kindly to a white woman involving herself in black affairs. This results in a mystery being uncovered that will forever change the lives of the two women. Even though this movie isn't very long compared to others, it felt like an eternity when watching it. It has its heart in the right place, but it ended up being one of the more boring and confusing movies I've watched this year, and a large part of that is because of the main characters and the way their romance unfolds. It's rare that I ever get the opportunity to make fun of bad acting, which I honestly feel kind of bad myself about doing, but in Tyra Black's case, I'm sorry, but she deserves it. Her actress is not at all convincing in the role, and is never able to get her lines out of her character in an emotionally convincing way. I don't know what it is, but there's just something bizarre about the way her character is portrayed. She has this odd, bug-eyed look on her face whenever she's in a tense moment, and she always waves a camera around in people's faces wherever she goes, even during inappropriate parts of the story, which made it hard for me to connect to her. The camera isn't the only insensitive thing about her either. The vast majority of her dialogue is extremely unusual, to put it mildly, and often made it hard for me to take her seriously. One scene features her talking with Sia, and all of a sudden, without warning, she asks her, "How is your dying grandma?" As if that's a totally normal question to ask someone. The other woman, Sia, is a bit better by comparison, if only due to the fact that she behaves more normally. She has an air of confidence in the way she carries out conversations with others that makes her more likable, and her relationship with her sick grandmother does help generate sympathy as well. The downside to her more grounded personality compared to Tyra, though, is that this makes her a bit more boring. She never pursues any goals or aspirations beyond caring for her grandmother, which is noble, but since that's pretty much the only thing she does, it doesn't exactly make for an intriguing character. The relationship that unfolds between the two women might be the most forced pairing I've seen in a movie to date. Not only is it predictable in the way they become closer with each other, but there's no reasoning behind why they inevitably end up together. It's literally a love at first sight scenario. The LGBT elements of the relationship is the only thing about it that stands out. It is sort of interesting to see the sexual rights of African women post-apartheid being explored, but it's only examined at surface level. No one ever really makes a big deal about the two, which does make sense since it takes place in a modern-day South Africa, but it is kind of odd considering their racial differences as well. Speaking of which, the themes surrounding racism and even colonialism to an extent are probably the best thing about it. There's a lot of details that can be unpacked regarding Tyra's obsession with Sia and how she tries to pull her away from her native setting for better opportunities, and this creates a lot of natural conflict as a result. There's also a meaningful dedication given to the victims of the Sharpeville massacre as a result of the apartheid movement, and explores the white guilt and savior complexes that some have as a result of that. If the movie had spent more time examining these aspects and how they subtly affected the characters, it would have fared much better. Sadly, these themes are not explored to their full potential. They end up being too overt in presentation compared to the LGBT elements, mostly due in part to Sia's boyfriend, Chepo. A lot of the story's conflict comes from him and his disapproval of Tyra, which feels forced in how it plays out. I'm probably going to catch some flack for saying that, but I just couldn't stand his character. His hostility toward white people is understandable, and his actions start to hurt black people around him as well, which is a good point to make, but the lengths he goes with his rage just felt artificial, and I absolutely hated the way his character arc ended. The sections where Tyra tours the Sharpeville area are another thing that contribute to the racial themes, but feel strange in how they're used. They're often located in the same place and don't contribute much to the story at hand, so their presence ends up being more of a distraction than anything else. However, I will say that the guide hosting those tours was an amazing source of comic relief. I feel like it wasn't intentional to have him make me laugh as hard as I did, but I couldn't help myself. Just hearing him mimic gun sound effects and going pow 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 with such enthusiasm made those parts of the story much less boring. And boring is ultimately what this movie ended up being in the long run. Outside of the romance, barely anything interesting happens in it. It drags at a snail's pace and is yawn-inducing, mostly thanks to its dreary soundtrack, which often loops and repeats itself in the same scene. It's weird because despite its slow pace, it feels like it's meant to be a thriller at times instead of a drama, despite there being little actual suspense. This is where the movie's soundtrack really started to annoy me, as anytime something remotely tense happens, it plays this loud droning noise that gets louder and louder, and again it loops constantly. It was so aggravating that I actually got a headache from listening to it. The movie also fails pretty badly when it comes to its cinematography. It repeatedly uses the same establishing shot in the same area when just one would have sufficed, and the number of long takes of both these and other shots of characters in the movie are out of control. In one scene, which I timed, it starts with Chepo just walking across a yard for 23 seconds before he ever actually does anything important. There is so much filler footage where people are just walking about and doing nothing else, and this made the story even more boring. The movie is in desperate need of a re-edit. As annoying as the establishing shots can be, it is still intriguing to see how desolate the town where Tyra tours is. The lack of people within creates a feeling of unease that builds more tension than whatever scheme Chepo comes up with, and the Vaal River ends up being a poignant symbol itself, representing life and the passage of time throughout the movie. The dream sequences, if you can call them that, were another thing that baffled me as well. I'm aware that they're meant to represent the past struggles with the apartheid and to drum up some sort of connection between Tyra and Sia, but the connection itself is pretty weak, and most of the time the scenes just don't make any sense. It all amounts to an ending that frankly didn't get much of a reaction out of me. At that point, the story was simply too repetitive, stale, and uninteresting for me to find much enjoyment in it. But with that said, I am glad for its 80-minute runtime, because it prevents the movie from outstaying its welcome. Overall, Jewel is a boring drama that doesn't draw much attention and doesn't exactly live up to its namesake. If you like dramas with racial themes behind them and you don't mind one that moves at a very slow pace, you might enjoy this, but for me it wasn't very appealing. It's admirable in its attempts to examine various social themes, but they're not explored to any serious degree, and with such flat characters to follow along with, that only makes the story less enticing to watch. What did you think about this movie? Were you able to find something more from its themes regarding sexuality and racism that I didn't, or did you also feel that it fell short? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Jewel. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the German romantic drama for JoJo. Bye bye!